Right, let's now try and get you some news back home from India, where India's Supreme Court heard the petition earlier today seeking the evacuation of the Shaheen Bagh protesters. Now, the Supreme Court, in fact, did not pass any interim order. It went on to make a few observations. It has said that protests should be contained to designated areas and that public roads cannot be blocked indefinitely in the name of protests. Now, the protest in Shaheen Bagh, of course, is led by women. It is an ongoing 24/7 sit-in peaceful protest that has gained widespread traction. It has been reported about around the world in several media agencies. Now, this is a protest that is taking place against the passage of the controversial Citizenship Amendment Act in the Parliament in December last year. The critics of this controversial Citizenship Amendment Act say that this is now, in some ways, violative of Article 14, which promises a right to equality in the Indian Constitution, and also, perhaps for the first time, makes religion a criteria for granting Indian citizenship. Now, the police, of course, had taken action post the passage of this controversial act. They had cracked down on some of the students who were protesting in Jamia Millia Islamia and also in AMU. And the Supreme Court will now again hear this case on the 17th of February. All right, now to add more perspective in terms of what's been happening and what has the Supreme Court actually said a little while earlier, we're joined in by our senior political affairs editor Kartikeya Sharma, who's joining us live from the newsroom. Good afternoon to you, Kartikeya. Now, this, of course, is a petition that came up for hearing in front of the Supreme Court a little while ago. What exactly has the Supreme Court said in this petition?
Supreme Court made two very important obiter dictas, which legally we can say the observation part of the court, but not written order. But obiter dictas are signs in which the court may move in coming days. So the two obiter dictas made by Justice Kaul on Monday were, one, that you cannot inconvenience public, and then the protest needs to take place in designated areas, which means that the protest cannot take place in any part of the city. But if we go by the laws which have been made at the civic level, Delhi, and not only Delhi, other cities have grappled with this issue. In 1970s and 80s, people were allowed to protest, organize big rallies in the Boat Club. Now, the Boat Club is part of the Central Vista, which is right directly opposite to the Rashtrapati Bhavan, President House, and in front of the Parliament of India. Now, this used to create a lot of public inconvenience.
Right.
Subsequently, by 2000, the venue for protest, anyone who wanted to protest, was moved to Jantar Mantar. And the first protest, the anti-corruption protest, which took place in 2011 when Anna Hazare was leading it, took place in Jantar Mantar. Subsequently, in Delhi, changes were made. Now the protest will need to take place at Ram Leela Maidan. Now, the Shaheen Bagh protests have closed a corridor which connects one part of the suburb of Delhi, which is Noida, to the heart of the Delhi. Now, it has led to a lot of traffic congestion in the capital of the country. So, it has created a debate that, well, your right to protest, does it entail the right to inconvenience other public or people who do not have anything to do with it? And this is not the first time, Saleh, it is happening in this country. In 1980s, similar debate broke out in then what used to be called Calcutta, today known as Kolkata, when the left party in power would say we would protest and ask people to close their shops. The counter argument, the pushback from the civil society and the middle class was, why should we suffer for your political positioning? So I think it's a moving debate, but going by the observation of the court, I think the Shaheen Bagh protest will have to shift sooner or later.
All right, that's an interesting point that you've made. Now, the fact that there is a right to protest that is enshrined in the Indian Constitution, given to all citizens under Article 19, which allows for people to assemble peacefully without arms. This is what the protesters, they are saying, that is not being questioned. What is being questioned is only the venue of it, where these petitioners claim that because they're sitting with their protest on this main road at Shaheen Bagh, it's causing a lot of inconvenience. But the protesters are saying that the passage of the CAA and the fact that the Home Minister of India, Amit Shah, has been talking repeatedly about the NRC is also causing them inconvenience.
There are two things here, Saleh. The protests have been very in Gandhian nature. They have been, the protests have been peaceful. Protests have not led to disruption of public life in context of violence. It has led to disruption of public life because a road has been blocked, which is a major arterial road, which has created pressure in other parts of the road infrastructure of Delhi. So that way it has inconvenienced public. So the protest, a lot of people say, has served their purpose. A lot of people argue, experts argue, well, if it is Gandhinian, it's a satyagraha, then they should be allowed. But that is one part of the argument. The larger issue is that Shaheen Bagh protests have been an issue which has received international coverage, which is CEA, which is NRC, and it has been covered by every major news agency internationally, and it has become a hot potato for the government. But the matter now, since is seized by the court, one will have to wait and see what order they will pass. But going by the obita dicta, I feel as a journalist that sooner or later they might have to shift the place of the protest. I don't think the protest is in question. I think the place is in question. And going by the obita dicta of it, I think this may happen.
Right, interesting. And just before I let you go, Karthikeya, it appears that the government would want the people to protest at a site that it would like to designate for them to sit in. I would also like to, refer to this order that was passed by the Delhi High Court when the case had come up for hearing in front of it. I'll just read out a line which was said as a part of its ruling, which said that in such a situation, no specific writ, order or direction can be issued by this court as to how to handle the agitation or the protest or the place of protest and traffic. It all depends on the ground reality and wisdom of the police. It is the Home Ministry that is in charge of the police in New Delhi. Why has it not acted so far?
Well, to answer that question, I would say that this correspondence took place at a time when the election was on in Delhi. So I think once the elections are over and the results are going to be out, and there will be no context of law and order, the electoral process, because when elections take place, as per the Indian Constitution, 60% of the government reports to the Election Commission of India. So there are certain issues, there are certain orders which cannot be passed by the executive at that point of time, unless and until law and order comes into operation or becomes the issue. So I think this issue will be solved, I would say resolved, after Tuesday.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Karthikeya Sharma, for joining us and getting us all those insights into what may happen, because the case will be heard again on the 17th of February, because the Supreme Court at this point of time has not made any interim order.